If someone were a newcomer to planet Earth and said, take me to your best football game, well, the NFL picked that game to start off the 2024 regular season. We got all that and much more on today's episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, football fans, and welcome into another episode of Locked On NFL, where we break down all the biggest stories from around the National Football League. It's Tuesday this week. We've got Lauren Cox at Cox Sports 1 on your favorite social media, myself, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola. On today's episode of Locked On NFL, we're going to dig into some of the best rivalries that aren't within divisions, including some games that bring together some teams with a lot of, let's just say, rotten history. We're also going to be taking a look at Antoine Winfield setting the mark for safeties in the NFL with his new contract, making history there. And we're going to lead it all off with the NFL's announcement that the Kansas City Chiefs traveling to the Baltimore Ravens will open up the 2024 NFL season. And at least in my opinion, it's the perfect game to open up the year. We got all that coming up for you on today's episode of Locked On NFL, which is brought to you by our friends at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Lauren, we got the news today. It's going to be Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Kansas City Chiefs, Baltimore Ravens, Taylor Swift, and Baltimore celebrities. It's going to be so much going on for the first game of the season to kick everything off. To me, dude, this feels like the perfect game to kick off the season. How does this one stack up for you?
I mean, you say Taylor Swift, but the relationship has to make it another 4 months.
That's right. Yeah, we got some time here.
Yeah. Maybe there'll be a wedding ring by then. I don't know. Anyway, but regardless, like, clearly the NFL is very happy to have a big AFC playoff matchup here. And I love that, like, you get to start off the season with two, like, veteran ready to go teams, right? Even like a team like the Buffalo Bills, we know that they're kind of doing some turnover there and trying to figure out what are the Bills going to look like this year? How good are they actually going to be? Like with the Ravens and the Chiefs, yeah, they're going to be slightly different. Every team has a little bit of turnover, but we're not going into this year questioning either of these teams as like, are they going to be as good next year? Like, are they going to be where they need to be? It's like, no, these are two like star ready quarterbacks with great coaching staffs. Like top to bottom, this is the showcase of the NFL's best, at least in the AFC.
Yeah, and the thing that I really like about this too, you mentioned Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and you know that just the star power of that is that we get those guys right away, and we get them healthy, right? Like these are both players that, you know, Lamar Jackson with the amount of running that he does, Patrick Mahomes typically seems to have the ankle injuries either in the conference game or the Super Bowl game, and it ends up being fine, but we get healthy wide receivers, or excuse me, we get healthy quarterbacks, we get healthy headliners to lead off this headline ready matchup, which I think is huge. It's like I said, I mean, if there was somebody that was coming down to planet Earth for the first time, extraterrestrial, and said, take me to your football, I would take them to that game. Those are the two teams I would want them to see play, and getting to see them play healthy, knock on wood, through training camp and all those other things is awesome. But it is early in the season.
I would question whether we call that intelligent life if it comes down here. The first priority is where is your football?
Take me to your football.
You don't need to talk to the UN or the president or anything. Like, no. Right. Let's see these guys play football. And honestly, like,
yeah, we have a particle collider. Like we got CERN. Like, there's so much here. Are you sure you want the Baltimore game? It's like, yeah, take me to that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, but no, you're 100% right. Like, I mean, I guess fingers crossed that everyone is still healthy week 1, but should be as healthy as you possibly can be coming in. But I do also wonder if it being the first game of the season after a bye week after the preseason, and a lot of these teams nowadays not taking the preseason as seriously, not playing as much. It feels like we've seen sloppier football to start the first couple of weeks of the last couple of seasons, really, as teams have had one fewer preseason game and played players less. And those, like, I remember week 1 last year, Kansas City lost to the Detroit Lions, and everyone was like, whoa,
right,
like, what's going on there? I mean, of course, the Chiefs went on to win like their next 6 or 7 games in a row, but like still, it was not full strength firing on all cylinders Chiefs. And maybe that means Kansas City will approach the preseason different this year and come into that game better. But I do wonder, like, is this full strength Chiefs and Ravens? Certainly full health, but like maybe not mid-season form just yet.
That is a really good point. And it kind of goes to your first point too, about sort of the consistency of these teams. I know Baltimore had to flip defensive coordinators and all with McDonald heading over to Seattle, but for the most part, these units still feel very much going into 2024 like they were when they exited 2023. So maybe that continuity, that cohesion helps them. But you're right. These are teams that have habitually started off a little bit slower at the beginning of the season. But I think one of the things that's going to be really, really interesting, and that I think we'll want to caution away from, is the sort of need to say whoever wins this game is the best in the NFL.
Well, it's so tough because like head to head is how we always want to measure that. Right. It's like when these two teams don't play each other, it's like, well, how can we know whether the Chiefs or the Ravens are better right now? But when you can look back and say, but the Chiefs won or but the Ravens won in week 1, so therefore they're the better team. But like, how often do we find that the team in week 13 is just not the same team that they were
right
1 or week 2, even separate from injuries? Like, so that's where it's, you know, you feel like they're going to throw everything at each other and they're not going to pull punches or anything. They're going to try and be as best as they can be. But like, if they rematch again in the AFC Championship game, I think we're going to see the game play out a lot differently than it did back in week 1 when you put that much time in between.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that I think we'll want to make sure that we kind of stay away from as best as we can, is to crown one of these teams off of this early win in week 1 in the AFC. It feels like we might have something akin to that with Green Bay and Philadelphia early on in the season as well, and people wanting to crown an NFC championship after week 1. But I cannot wait for the Overreaction Tuesday that follows all of these games and sort of the week slate of these games. I'm just curious about how much we'll sort of see that storyline come across. But the thing that has been really cool, though, is that when you have two young quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, it does feel like, and we're gonna list some of our favorite non-division rivalries a little bit later, but this certainly feels like this is one of them that has been kind of in the making. You've got guys that are consistently in MVP conversations, that are consistently in the playoffs, in the same conference, all that. That's got to be another big draw for a week 1 matchup.
Well, and I think there's still some lingering hard feelings from the AFC Championship game last year. Not only the Chiefs winning, obviously, but like even beyond that, there was the pregame moment with, you know, Justin Tucker was trying to warm up field goals, and Travis Kelce or whatever moved his tee, or I don't remember the exact details, but like clearly some disagreement about what areas of the field and what space they were supposed to be warming up on. And I think at first everyone was kind of like, all right, like, okay, they're whatever. We weren't sure, were they joking? Were they that serious? But everything that's come out of that since was like, no, that made the Chiefs real mad. They were not happy with the way that the Ravens handled that. But I mean, they were in Baltimore, so I don't know that you
right.
Still, I think there's some lingering feelings of like, hey man, like we're the Super Bowl champions, not you guys. So get out of our way. We are the MVPs here. As great of a kicker as Justin Tucker is, sorry, buddy, but you are a kicker, and you know my salary as Patrick Mahomes is, you know, massive, dwarfs yours. So like, you can go warm up somewhere else because we are the champion Kansas City.
Yeah, take me your football. The other thing that's kind of interesting about this too is that the Chiefs starting their season on the road means that we still have yet to see who's going to be the opponent for the ring ceremony pregame situation, like the celebration back at Arrowhead Stadium when they kick off in 2024. So I'm curious to see if the NFL makes that a divisional game, to see if maybe they can spice up the rivalries a little bit there.
I think they'd like to make sure that's maybe a slightly lesser opponent that you feel pretty good about. Okay, like,
you want to win that day.
The ring ceremony, as opposed to like, here's your rings, and then you just lose, and it's like, it just spoils it a little bit. So
that's fair.
Like Raiders, maybe, no offense to the Raiders, but like Raiders maybe is where they may do that first home game.
Could be. We don't even know who Denver's quarterback's going to be yet. Denver could be a little bit of that too. So they've got a couple of division, opponents that could potentially be. But Kansas City always has surprisingly struggled in those. Not struggled, but that's typically when they're surprised, is in those division games, and that's what happens when you go up against division opponents. We're going to be discussing a little bit more of those non-divisional rivalries a little bit later. But coming up next, we want to look at Antoine Winfield Jr. setting the high bar for safeties, not just for 2024, but in NFL history. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by our friends at Gametime, the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite games. As the NFL schedule comes out this week, Gametime is going to be the best way to start looking at tickets for your team. they're going to be able to give you the view from your seat, so you know exactly where you're going to sit in your favorite team's venue, or if you're following them along on the road. And their all-in pricing makes it super easy to know exactly how much you're going to pay for that seat without any last-minute fees or upcharges coming up that all of a sudden it costs way more than you thought you would. And now you're like, well, do I still really want to go to the game? Like, that's why I love Gametime, and I use it all the time. I buy my concerts on Gametime, my comedy shows, live theater events. I mean, any kind of live entertainment in your area, you're going to be able to find tickets on Gametime. So take some of the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right, everybody, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. We appreciate you very much making us your first listen. For your second listen today, go check out your favorite Locked On NFL podcast, whatever your favorite team is, Locked On, and then that team name, you'll be able to find it. You'd also go and check out Locked On Sports Today as well for all of the biggest stories around the world of sports on our 24/7 YouTube stream, the first of its kind when it comes to national sports streams on YouTube. You'd also find it for free on the Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Antoine Winfield makes history with his new deal. And Lauren, if we're being real, he absolutely deserves it. 4 years, $84 million. That's 21 per. And this is the first time in NFL history that we have seen a defensive back be the highest paid or the highest paid defensive back in the NFL being a safety as opposed to a cornerback. And it feels like this was the right guy for this to go to.
Definitely seeing the best safety in the NFL the last couple of seasons become the highest paid safety. But this feels to me like the contract where a lot of the rest of the NFL looks at the Buccaneers and gets mad at them because they're like, wait, why are you paying him that much? Like it feels a little bit like he's the best player. So of course, like, it's not like no one questions, hey, why did you pay him? It's like, whoa, like did you have to make him that much higher paid than every other safety? Like, currently, Derwin James is the highest paid safety in the NFL per year at $19 million a year. And this jumps him up to, what was it, 21 and some change there. Like, this is not just, hey, it's not just, hey, make me a little bit better, but pay me a little bit more than the best guy. It's like, no, blow all the other safeties out of the water. I'm a DB. I'm not just a safety. And to be fair, like, Winfield will come down and play the slot. He'll play in the box quite a bit, but he's primarily a free safety and great at it. It just seems like market value here dictated, $20 million a year or whatever, but like they go even another step above and beyond that. And all these other teams that have safety contracts coming up are going, God, come on, Tampa. Why are you paying him so much? Can you just make him the highest paid, but don't move everything up there. Now we got to pay everybody else more.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think a lot of general managers are looking at that and going, "Oh my goodness, come on! You couldn't just take a little bit of step up. You had to go the extra mile there." But look, for Antoine Winfield, like, I think a lot of people would consider him the best defensive player in the division of the NFC South, beyond just being the best player for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, best defensive player for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Maybe some folks might still say, Mike Evans or whatever. But I would say Antoine Winfield is the best player there. And it's interesting because we have seen a pretty active safety market so far here over the course of free agency. And there's still a big name out there in Justin Simmons, formerly of the Denver Broncos, now still waiting to kind of see where he's going to land. He visited with the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee Titans went a different direction because of money conversations, according to Diana Rossini. But I mean, I don't think Justin Simmons is going to sign and challenge for that much, but it might raise the floor of what Justin Simmons is able to actually ask for now that you have that little bit of a gap between Derwin James or that larger gap between Derwin James and Justin Simmons, or excuse me, Antoine Winfield. Not that Justin Simmons will like slot in there, but it might just raise whatever his floor is a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how the safety market in particular, along with the rest of the corners, but the safety market in particular, how it responds to this over the course of the next, season, 2 seasons?
Yeah, I wonder if that makes it harder or easier on Justin Simmons. Like, on the one hand, I mean, it should be able to justify him asking for a certain amount of money, but if teams already viewed him at a certain value, and maybe he viewed himself at a value, and you're trying to find somewhere in the middle, like, if this deal for Antoine Winfield raises where he's at negotiations higher, like, that would in theory make things farther apart from teams, unless teams disagree. All right, like, I guess, like, are they going to let Tampa negotiate their contract? We're willing to pay Justin Simmons this amount of money, but since Tampa did that, I guess, all right, I guess we'll give you more, because, like, he's still sitting out there as a free agent. It's not like there's a bidding of the world's longest bidding war going on here. So it's like at the end of the day, someone's going to have to sort of meet someone in the middle here. And it will probably result in him getting more money than he thought he would, but it could delay this process even further.
Yeah. And then the next thing is going to be, how do you as NFL teams now balance when you have, a Patrick Surtain to pay or a Derek Stingley to pay, knowing that a safety is now the highest paid? Does that create, like, are you still comparing corners to corners? Are you comparing corners to DBs as a whole? And are you now competing to re-sign your cornerbacks as high as the safeties that are out there now, or as high as Antoine Winfield out there? So it'd be interesting to kind of see the ripple effect from that case too, when you get into next season and the seasons beyond.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think when you look across the safety market, like generally you see a significantly higher value for like the Antoine Winfield style of safety, right? The free safety as opposed to the, the box strong safeties. I know, like,
absolutely,
it's like Derwin James is a little bit the exception there, if you're truly the best of the best at that position, but generally, like, it's those guys. And I wonder if with this will kind of continue to spread that gap where, okay, maybe the true free safety ball hawk back the defense guys keep going higher and higher and are more like corners. But if that ends up devaluing the strong safety as well, because like, well, okay, well, if we're putting so much money in this style of safety, we can't afford to pay both. Can we afford to pay both safeties at that high level? Or do we kind of have to say, if we're a team that really designates more of a difference between those positions or that style of play, are we going to have put a much stronger priority on those kind of safeties? And will then more of the box safety style of player continue to be devalued in that way? Or does this raise the ship for all safeties? Like that's something I'm really curious to see how it affects the market moving forward.
Yeah, because this is a position group along with maybe, off-ball linebacker where we typically see a lot of like ebbs and flows. Like this is a position that teams go out there and spend a lot of money on 1 year and then don't spend any money on for the next 3 or 4 years. And all of a sudden it shoots up again and things like that. And then this year you had, when it comes to the deep safety, the free safety style, the post safety guy, there wasn't a strong draft class, incoming talent to the NFL when it came to that style. There was like Tyler Nubin and maybe a couple of other guys that can kind of check those boxes. Jalen Simpson out of Auburn had a ball hawk sort of tag on him, but he was a later round selection and all that. And so I'm curious too how much the incoming talent in the NFL at the position will influence simultaneously some of those decisions and some of those delineations, because we definitely see the delineation between the value of the free safety and the box safety, or the coverage safety and the run support safety in the draft. And then there are times where that's echoed in the contracts that are received. And so it'll be interesting to see also that ripple effect that comes from all that. The other ripple effect that happens here is that Antoine Winfield now becomes the last franchise tag player to get a deal. And so the most recent franchise tag player to get a deal, meaning that the last remaining player on a franchise tag is wide receiver T. Higgins from the Cincinnati Bengals, who has had trade talk circulating around him all offseason, despite having said himself that he expects to remain a Cincinnati Bengal. I'll be curious to see if maybe that, July 15th, I believe, is the deadline to extend guys when it comes to the franchise tag. I'll be curious to see, with him being the last one there, just how much longer any decision, trade, new contract, playing on the franchise tag, whatever, ends up getting made on him, how quickly the Cincinnati Bengals get to that.
Yeah, I think the NFL draft kept Higgins' leverage pretty high for these working with the Bengals, right? I mean, they drafted Jermaine Burton in the third round, and like a receiver I like quite a bit, but like a rookie third round pick is not going to be a satisfactory replacement for not just T. Higgins, but also Tyler Boyd. He just signed with the Titans a week or two ago. So all of a sudden, like if the Bengals lost T. Higgins, it would be Jamar Chase and the third round rookie. And then they drafted Charlie Jones last year in the fourth round. Like there's guys with potential there, but not anything proven or consistent for Joe Burrow. When you have this championship window right now, like the Bengals got to find a way to pay T. Higgins, because I don't think they can get by with a receiving core right now without him. If they had brought back Tyler Boyd, or maybe even used an earlier draft pick at wide receiver, maybe we have more of that conversation about, okay, maybe they can withstand losing Higgins, and getting a big return for Higgins can certainly help sort of mitigate some of that. But like they need T. Higgins right now in this offense to be anywhere close to where they want to be this season. So I think he should be feeling pretty good about, hey, like they need me here more than I want to be out of here, but they can't afford to lose me.
Yeah, he's got some pretty good leverage there. And even if they did get a good return on him, It's not helping him right now, right? And who knows how long it would take for that receiver to transition to the NFL, to the pros, all those other things. So there's a ton here in going in T. Higgins' favor. So we'll see how it goes before that mid-July deadline. All right, coming up next, Lauren and I are going to take a look at some of our favorite non-division rivalries. And of course, I've got a couple on my list, at least, that have some really bad blood already. So we got all that coming up for you as we continue on to wrap up today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own, or you can even look ahead to this upcoming football season as well. But right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So you bet your $5 on anything, the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs, the baseball season, you name it. And if your bet wins, not only do you get that winning from your $5 bet, but then they'll add an extra $150 in bonus bets into your account that you can use to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. With the two games we already know about this upcoming NFL season, of course, we already talked about Ravens at Chiefs right now. The opening line on FanDuel is Chiefs favored by 2.5 in that game at home. And we also have Packers at Eagles in Brazil. And the Eagles, as the home team in Brazil, are favored by 1.5 there. Pretty tight on the money line for both of those teams. And the over-unders are both pretty close as well. 46.5 in the Chiefs game, 48.5 in the Eagles game. So you can use those bonus bets on those NFL games already. I love it. Love getting in on the action early. To get your $150 in bonus bets, visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
All right, y'all, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On NFL. Lauren and I are going to dive into some of the biggest non-division rivalries that are out there in the NFL. And of course, we got a lot to choose from with so much bad blood out there with some of these teams. So we're going to be taking a look at all that. Don't forget, though, that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV on their free Fire TV channels apps. Therefore, you 24/7, giving you all the biggest stories from around the league with the people that know the teams the most, that cover them every single day, including as well beyond our local shows, national shows that cover every league, like this show here with Locked On NFL. So you can find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels at part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Lauren, we're taking a look at some of these non-division rivalries that are out there, right? We know the big rivalries. We know Green Bay and Chicago. We know New Orleans and Atlanta. But there are some of these other really, really big ones out there that are not within the division. What are a few that stand out to you and one that you really want to dive into here today?
Yeah, there's certainly going to be a theme here of, like, of course, the teams that are really good now are the ones that are going to have the most rivalries with teams outside of their division because they're playing them in the playoffs. And you don't, if you're not that team, if you're not a fan of the Chiefs or the 49ers or whoever, then you don't like that they're better than you and that they're beating you. But like the one that strikes me right now, especially is Green Bay and San Francisco. It played in the NFC divisional round this year. That was the NFC divisional round this year. And 49ers won and took care of business, but like that's been kind of quietly a long running thing, especially in the postseason. Like they've had some back and forth in the regular season, but I was just looking through, it's been 5 straight January games that the 49ers have beat the Packers, like playoff games in January, 5 straight dating back to 2013. So the last time the Packers beat the 49ers in the playoffs was 2002. So it's like every couple of years, the Packers go on a playoff run here, San Francisco in the playoffs, and come up short. And they keep being the little brother to San Francisco. The only time they've gone farther is like when San Francisco hasn't been in the playoffs to stop them. So that to me has become kind of quietly a rivalry, or at least certainly it might be a one-sided rivalry for Packers fans, but definitely one that gets irritated. And I think 49ers fans kind of feel like, oh yeah, well, Green Bay, we're pretty good at taking care of business with them.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good one. And another one that stands out for me for that same reason, but I think it's on more Green Bay getting the wins, is Green Bay Dallas, right? Green Bay Dallas kind of has had the same or a similar effect, but Green Bay kind of taking those games and kind of making things tough for the Dallas Cowboys. Historically, you would look at like Dallas and San Francisco, you know, the Deion Sanders days and all these other things that were all a part of that. But I've got one that I think is really interesting because it's not even in the same conference. And maybe I'm overblowing what this rivalry really is. But what about the Rams and the Chargers? Both of these being sort of the LA teams. It's branded now big battle for LA. When I lived in Los Angeles, you would drive around, you'd see billboards for this game when it was on the way and things like that. I think with these two teams now being not only in the same city, but at least for now sharing the same stadium, all that other stuff, it's kind of like when the Clippers and the Lakers play. Like it's kind of got a similar feel to where it's about like who's the home team today and everything like that. And so I have a lot of respect for that rivalry, even if it's not a maybe nationally recognized rivalry or anything like that, but like for the local impact that it has, I think it's a pretty big one that I certainly have an appreciation for.
Yeah, I would say it has Clippers Lakers energy also in the sense that like the Lakers have been the big brother in that for a while.
Yes.
It's not that the Chargers aren't any good, but like the Rams are the big brother in that big brother little brother relationship in terms of like LA, right? Like the Chargers kind of swing in and it's like everyone's like, oh, what are you doing here? You know, like at least the Rams kind of had that history that people have been kind of able to reconnect to, but the Chargers just kind of showed up and were like, hey, we're here too. We love it as well. And I wonder if this like all of the play up of this, the Battle of LA, like I don't sense a ton of like animosity per se. I don't know, like a lot of like Rams fans hate Chargers fans because those you know freeloaders or those those guys who are bandwagon fans or whatever. Like, but it certainly feels like a rivalry that the NFL would like to promote in order to just like generate interest in LA football. Cause that's been kind of the storyline, right? Is that people in LA don't go to the games enough or that there's just not, there's too much going on in Los Angeles and too many other sports and stuff that football it's not a football town. And if you can play up that battle for LA between like two teams that are actually fun to watch, like that's kind of years. Like these are both really fun teams that have been successful in recent years. Like they should like that more. So I hope that the rivalry between them can continue to pull more out of that. Cause I mean, SoFi Stadium, also a beautiful venue too.
Oh, gorgeous. And now you have the Harbaugh factor in all of it. So we'll see if that ends up helping to grow it too. He's
pretty good at rivalries, I think, from his college days.
Yeah.
If I don't,
he's pretty accustomed to those. That's for sure. I'll throw another one out there that I think is really interesting. I'm going to quickly mention New Orleans and the Rams just because we just talked about the Rams. Obviously, from like the no call back in the 2018 playoffs and all those other things, there's always a little bit of a heat there that's always there. But one that I'm also looking forward to watching grow, and maybe this one never grows. And there's a chance at it, but I've been enjoying sort of the opportunities to watch the Houston Texans go up against the Cleveland Browns post Deshaun Watson trade. If you look at the trade in a vacuum, remove names from it, remove court cases from it, all those other things, by all intents and purposes, that trade in a vacuum, Cleveland should have come out the better team. They got the veteran quarterback. The Houston Texans had to reset almost an entire roster. And in the process of doing that, also had to hire a new head coach and bring in a rookie quarterback and all those other things. But then when you start to attach the names to it and you attach the context to it, that it is Deshaun Watson, that Deshaun Watson has not panned out in Cleveland, that I doubt Deshaun Watson will pan out in Cleveland, that CJ Stroud was that rookie quarterback, the additional trade up and utilization of those assets to also go and get Will Anderson out of Alabama to help their defense, DeMeco Ryans and what he's done with that team. It just feels so much like that the Texans walked out of this like it just gangbusters, man. Like they really like there's not a lot of trades that happen in the NFL where you really go like that team won that trade, but goodness gracious, did Houston end up improving like crazy off of that?
Yeah, it's one of those that when you saw the kind of haul that Houston got, you certainly can like dream of how good it can become. But so often we see like team gets a bunch of draft picks, but how many of those picks are they really going to hit on? Or are they really going to use those resources that well? Or like you'll see those drafts like, oh, they drafted all these kind of bad players and never really ended up panning out. It was a great trade for the team that like the proven commodity tends to be more valuable than the lottery ticket draft picks. And yet for Houston to have been able to really kind of cash in on those speaks to the job they're doing over there of putting a roster together, and maybe some poor asset management by the Cleveland Browns. I want to throw one at you real quick, or more like ask your opinion. I didn't talk about this to you before we started, but I thought Minnesota and New Orleans would become more of a rivalry after the 2018 Minneapolis Miracle, and like they've played a couple of times, but like, are people in Minnesota just too nice for that? Like, I don't know.
I think that might be the case. That could be the case. Like, the personalities of the fan bases are so juxtaposed. Like, the New Orleans Saints fan base is very petty, likes to have fun, like all these other things. Like, we're from New Orleans. Like, I'm from New Orleans. Like, we love petty here in this city. But yeah, maybe Minnesota fans are just too gosh darn stinking nice. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just the Midwest hospitality and in the Southern pettiness. Like, it just, the blood doesn't get boiling anymore.
It's like, oh, we don't want to rub it in on you. Sorry, we got away with one there. You guys really won that game. Sorry, we can't. I don't know why they become Canadian at this point, but like, sorry about that. Don't mean to make you mad. Like, it just felt like they were like apologizing for winning. It's weird, but yeah, I think that prevented what could have been, I think, a cool non-division rivalry.
Yeah, and there was some build there too, because you had Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara, and the dynamic between those two running backs was very similar. There were some early conversations around like which one of them is going to be better, which one is better, all that. And then Dalvin Cook has since like gone a different way, and Alvin Kamara, the Saints have struggled to use him. You had Kirk Cousins. I don't know that Kirk Cousins really is going to be the rivalry quarterback. You know what I mean? But he had that in the NFC East when he was playing with Washington, going up against Dallas and all sorts of stuff. So I don't know, maybe it just didn't, there wasn't enough of the sustainability of both of those teams getting to the playoffs and facing one another in the playoffs. I think that was the big thing, because there was the Minneapolis Miracle, like you mentioned, in the playoffs. And then there was the Christmas game where Alvin Kamara ran for like 20 touchdowns. And then you had the Kyle Rudolph catch that won a playoff game here in New Orleans as well a couple years later. And so like, you've had all of this history there, but for whatever reason, and then the Saints beating Minnesota on the way to a Super Bowl back in 2009. But it just never caught fire. It just never caught fire.
You just need both the teams to be better, but that's how it goes. But what have you done for lately? Neither team is impressing a lot right now. So you can't really get that mad at another team when you're not doing that well.
Yeah, that's fair. That's exactly fair. All right, y'all, we appreciate you very much for joining us for another very fun episode of Locked On NFL. Make sure you go and check out Lauren Cox over at Locked On Bears and at Cox Sports One. You can find me on your favorite social media at Ross Jacksonola and over at Locked On Saints. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here with us, making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, make sure you go check out your favorite teams Locked On podcast. We got you covered across the NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL, and dozens of college shows as well. So make sure you're sticking around with us and checking us out. And of course, tomorrow, James and Chris will be here answering some of the biggest questions ahead of the NFL schedule release. You will not want to miss that, especially with all of the some of the international games being announced this morning as well. They'll be able to react to that on Wednesday's episode. So we'll see you here very soon here on Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.